The deep and dark waters of Lake Okanagan hold secrets that have whispered through the tall pines of British Columbia for centuries. This vast body of water stretches over 80 miles through the valley, and its depths plunge down into a cold abyss that has never fully been explored by modern science. Locals know that something ancient resides in these waters, something that was here long before the first roads were carved into the mountainside. The surface of the lake often appears calm and glass, like reflecting the blue sky and the surrounding peaks. But this tranquility is merely a mask. Beneath the waves lies a history of fear and reverence that demands respect from anyone foolish enough to venture out alone. The silence of the lake is heavy, with the weight of unseen eyes watching from below. For thousands of years, the indigenous Syilx people have lived in harmony with this land, and they have always known of the dweller in the deep. They named the creature Naitaka, which translates to the demon of the water, or the sacred beast of the lake. This was not a creature of fairy tales, or a story to frighten children into obedience, but a terrifying reality of their daily existence. Naitaka was a powerful spiritual entity that demanded tribute and acknowledgement from those who wished to cross its domain safely. The elders spoke of a massive serpent-like beast with the head of a horse or a sheep, and a body that coiled endlessly through the dark currents. To ignore Naitaka was to invite death, and many who disrespected the lake were never seen again. The legend of Timbasket is a chilling reminder of the price of arrogance when facing the demon of the lake. Timbasket was a visiting chief who scoffed at the warnings of the local people and refused to pay the customary tribute to the spirit of the waters. He believed that his own strength and the speed of his canoe were enough to protect his family as they crossed the perilous section of the lake near Squally Point. As he paddled out with his family, the sky turned an ominous shade of gray, and the wind began to howl through the valley. The water churned violently around his boat, and the calm lake transformed into a boiling cauldron of white caps and dark swells. Without warning, the massive jaws of Naitaka rose from the depths and snatched Timbasket and his family from their vessel, dragging them down into the freezing darkness. The lake swallowed them whole, leaving nothing behind but splinters of wood and the echoing silence of the aftermath. This tragedy cemented the law of the lake among the people living on its shores. Before crossing the dangerous waters at Squally Point, travelers would always offer a sacrifice to appease the beast. They would throw a small animal, such as a dog or a chicken, into the water to feed the hunger of the monster, ensuring their own safe passage. It was a grim payment for survival in a land where nature was the ultimate master. When European settlers began to arrive in the Okanagan Valley in the mid-19th century, they brought with them a skepticism that would soon be tested. These pioneers looked beautiful lake and saw only a resource for transportation and commerce, ignoring the dark stories told by the indigenous population. They built their cabins near the water and launched their heavy wooden boats with confidence, believing that their technology and rifles made them the rulers of this new world. However, the lake did not care for their confidence or their ignorance. Reports began to circulate among the settlers of strange logs that moved against the current and massive shapes that broke the surface of the water on moonless nights. One of the most famous early accounts came from Susan Allison, a hardy pioneer woman who lived in a cabin near the lake in the year 1872. During a violent summer storm, she looked out across the churning water and saw something that defied all logic and reason. Through the rain and the mist, she witnessed a massive creature swimming powerfully against the wind and the waves. It was not a log or a wave, but a living, breathing beast of enormous size. She described it as having a long neck and a body that undulated through the water like a giant snake. Her testimony sent a shiver of fear through the settler community as they realized the native legends were based on a terrifying truth. As the valley population grew, so did the number of sightings, transforming the creature from a local myth into a national sensation. By the 1920s, the beast had been given the name Ogopogo, a cheerful-sounding name that belied the horror of the encounters. In 1926, a mass sighting occurred at Okanagan Mission Beach that could not be dismissed as a hallucination or a hoax. Over 30 cars were parked along the shore, and dozens of people watched in stunned silence as the creature surfaced and swam parallel to the beach. The witnesses included upstanding members of the community whose reputations were beyond reproach. They all described the same thing: a massive serpent with dark skin and a series of humps breaking the water. The fear became so palpable during this era that the ferry services operating on the lake began to take precautions. Ferry captains armed themselves with rifles and kept a sharp lookout for any sign of the monster during their crossings. The government even considered installing protective nets in certain swimming areas to prevent the beast from attacking tourists. The laughter and joy of summer vacations were tainted by a creeping dread that something prehistoric was lurking just beneath the feet of swimmers. Every shadow in the water became a potential threat, and every sudden splash caused panic on the beaches. The lake had become a place of beauty and terror in equal measure. Among the many stories told in the logging camps and fishing shacks, there is one tale that chills the blood of even the most hardened outdoorsman. It is the story of a man named Silas, a solitary logger, who lived in a small cabin on the remote western shore of the lake in the early 1930s. Silas was a man who preferred the company of trees to people, and he often spent his evenings fishing alone in a small rowboat. He was not a superstitious man, and he often laughed at the city folk who were afraid of a little water. One evening, in late autumn, Silas pushed his boat out onto the glassy surface of the lake. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, the air was crisp and cold, and the sky was a canvas of deep purple and fading orange. Silas rowed steadily towards his favorite fishing spot, a deep drop-off near the infamous Squally Point, where the water was rumored to be bottomless. He dropped his line into the black depths and settled in for a quiet wait, enjoying the absolute silence of the wilderness. For an hour, the only sound was the gentle lap of water against the wooden hull of his boat. But as the last light of day vanished and the stars began to appear, the atmosphere shifted. The birds that usually called out at dusk fell silent, and the wind died down completely, leaving the lake in a state of unnatural stillness. Silas felt a sudden drop in temperature, a cold chill that seemed to radiate from the water itself. He pulled his coat tighter around him and scanned the horizon, feeling a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. He had spent his entire life in the woods, and he knew when a predator was nearby. The silence was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then he heard it, a low, rhythmic splashing sound coming from the darkness to his left. It was soft at first, but it was getting closer. Silas gripped his oars, his knuckles turning white as he strained his eyes to see through the gloom. A shape emerged from the shadows, a long, dark object that looked like a floating telephone pole. Silas relaxed slightly, thinking it was just a piece of drift, wood caught in a strange current. But then the log did something impossible. It turned. The object pivoted in the water and began to move directly towards his small boat, picking up speed as it approached. The hair on the arms of the logger stood up as he realized this was no piece of wood. A distinct wake formed behind the object, and a foul odor of musk and stagnant water drifted through the air. Silas grabbed his oars and prepared to row for his life, but fear froze him in place. The creature breached the surface less than 20 feet from his boat, rising up out of the water with a terrifying grace. The head was large and blocky, resembling the head of a sheep or a horse, but devoid of any fur or hair. Its skin was a dark, slick slate gray that glistened in the starlight. Massive black eyes fixed upon Silas, reflecting the faint light of the moon with a cold and ancient intelligence. The logger stared into the face of a monster that should have been extinct for millions of years. He could see the water cascading off its long neck and the powerful muscles flexing beneath its thick hide. The beast was immense, easily longer than his small boat, and its body continued to coil and uncoil in the water behind it. Silas felt insignificant and fragile, a tiny speck of life floating on a deep grave. The creature did not attack immediately, but instead it began to circle the boat, creating a gentle whirlpool that rocked the vessel from side to side. It was studying him, observing him, with a curiosity that felt predatory and cruel. Silas knew that one strike from its tail, or one snap of its jaws, would shatter his boat and send him into the freezing depths where no one would ever find him. The circling continued for what felt like an eternity, with the creature moving silently through the water like a dark ghost. Silas could hear the wet sound of its breathing, a heavy rasping noise that echoed across the quiet lake. He was trapped in the middle of the open water, with nowhere to run and no weapon to defend himself. He remembered the stories of the sacrifices and the old legends, and he wished he had something to offer the beast. He fumbled in his pocket and found only a pocket knife and a few coins. He threw the coins into the water, a desperate and pathetic offering to the demon of the lake. The creature paused in its movement, its head rising higher out of the water to inspect the splash. For a moment, Silas thought it was going to strike. The massive head loomed over the boat, casting a long shadow across the wood. The eyes blinked slowly, a membrane sliding across the black orbs. Then, with a sudden and violent motion, the beast arched its back and dove straight down. The displacement of water was massive. A wave surged over the side of the rowboat, filling it with inches of freezing water and nearly capping it. Silas was thrown from his seat, his head striking the gunwale hard. Dazed and terrified, Silas scrambled back onto the bench, grabbing the oars with trembling hands. He did not wait to see if the creature would resurface. He rowed with a strength born of pure panic, his muscles burning. As he propelled the heavy boat towards the distant shore, every splash of his oars sounded like a gunshot in the silence, and he expected to feel the jaws of the monster clamping down on the hull at any second. He kept his eyes fixed on the tree line, refusing to look back at the black water behind him. The journey back felt endless, the shore seemingly miles away. As he rowed, he felt a heavy thud against the bottom of the boat. Something massive had brushed against the keel, testing the wood. Silas screamed a raw sound of terror that was swallowed by the vast night. He rowed harder, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The water around him seemed to boil, as if the creature was swimming just below the surface, matching his speed. He could feel the vibration of its movement through the wood of the boat. It was toying with him, letting him think he could escape before dragging him down. Finally, the sound of the hull scraping against rocks reached his ears. Silas did not wait to secure the boat. He leaped out into the shallow water, falling to his knees on the sharp stones of the beach. He scrambled up the bank, on all fours clawing at the dirt and grass, until he was well away from the water line. He collapsed near the tree, lying his chest, heaving his heart, pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He turned back to look at the lake, expecting to see the monster charging onto the land. But the water was calm once again, the ripples fading into the darkness, Silas never went out on the lake again. He packed his belongings the next day and left the cabin, abandoning his life as a logger. He moved inland, far away from any deep water, and spent the rest of his life warning others about the demon of Lake Okanagan. His hair turned white within a year, and he was often seen staring blankly at the ground, muttering about the eyes that watched from the deep. His story became just another thread in the tapestry of fear that surrounds the legend of Ogopogo. But for Silas, it was the end of his world. The encounter Silas survived is just one of hundreds recorded over the last century. There are darker stories of those who were not as lucky. In the early days of the settlement, there were reports of horses being pulled under while swimming across the lake. Farmers would watch in horror as their strong work horses suddenly panicked and were dragged beneath the surface by an unseen force. No carcass ever floated back up. The lake simply claimed them, leaving no trace of the struggle. These disappearances were often blamed on currents or cramps, but the locals knew better. The scientific community has tried repeatedly to explain away the phenomenon. They speak of sturgeon that grow to massive sizes, or logs that bob in the waves, or optical illusions caused by the heat and the light. They send expeditions with sonar equipment and underwater cameras scanning the bottom of the lake for proof. Occasionally, they find strange readings, large shapes, moving at depths where no fish should be. But the lake is deep and full of underwater caves and crevices where a large creature could easily hide. The beast remains elusive, a phantom that refuses to be categorized or captured. Some cryptozoologists believe that Ogopogo could be a surviving basilosaurus, a primitive whale that lived millions of years ago. The physical description matches perfectly with the serpentine body and the distinct head shape. Others believe it is a plesiosaur trapped in the lake. When the glaciers receded at the end of the last ice age, the idea that a prehistoric monster could survive in a land locked lake seems impossible to many. But the Okanagan is a place of deep mystery. The water is cold and deep enough to preserve secrets that the rest of the world has forgotten. Despite the fear, the legend has become a tourist attraction. The city of Kelowna has a statue of the monster, and souvenir shops sell plush toys and t-shirts bearing its likeness. They have turned the demon Naitaka into a mascot, a friendly cartoon character to bring in visitors. But this commercialization masks a very real and lingering fear. You will rarely see a local swimming in the deep water in the middle of the lake. They stick to the shallows near the beaches where the bottom is visible. They know that the statue in the park is a lie and that the real thing is out there waiting. The area around Squally Point remains the epicenter of the mystery. It is here that the water is deepest and the storms are most violent. Divers who have ventured into these waters report a feeling of intense, unease, a sensation of being watched by something intelligent. There are underwater caves here that extend deep into the rock, vast enough to house a creature of immense size. It is believed that this is the lair of the beast, the place where it rests during the day before emerging at night to hunt. The indigenous people still avoid this area, respecting the ancient boundaries set by their ancestors. Even in the modern day, with high-definition cameras and smartphones, the sightings continue. Every year, there are new reports of large wakes appearing on calm days and dark humps breaking the surface. A couple out for a romantic boat ride will suddenly see a massive shape moving alongside them. A hiker on the mountain trails will look down and see a disturbance in the water that cannot be explained by wind or boat traffic. The monster has not vanished. It has simply learned to be more cautious in a world filled with technology. The skeptics will always have their doubts, and the scientists will always demand physical proof. But for those who have stood on the shore and looked into the black eyes of the beast, the truth is undeniable. They carry the memory of that encounter like a scar, a permanent reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. They know that we are not the masters of this planet, and that there are still things in the dark that hunt us. The lake is a beautiful place, but it is also a graveyard of secrets. The water of Lake Okanagan remains cold and dark, preserving its mysteries in the deep silt of the bottom. The legend of Ogopogo is not just a story to tell around a campfire. It is a warning. It is a reminder that there are forces of nature that we cannot control or understand. The next time you find yourself standing on the shore of a deep lake, looking out at the calm water, take a moment to listen to the silence. Watch the ripples closely. You might tell yourself it is just the wind or a fish jumping, but somewhere deep down in the primal part of your brain, you will wonder what lies beneath. You will wonder if the legends are true, and if the demon Naitaka is watching you back. The monster does not need you to believe in it to exist. It was here long before us, and it will be here long after we are gone. The lake never gives up its dead, and the serpent waits patiently in the dark, ready to claim the next soul who dares to disrespect the water. The dread lingers like a fog that never lifts. The sun sets over the valley, casting long shadows that stretch across the water like grasping fingers. The boats return to the safety of the marina, and the beaches empty out. The lake is left alone with the night. Under the light of the moon, the surface breaks ever so slightly. A dark shape rises, takes a breath of the cool night air, and slips back into the abyss. Ogopogo is not a ghost, but a living, breathing nightmare, and it is always hungry. The story has no end, only a pause, until the next encounter.